On today's Locked On Nationals, we are joined by Pete Medhurst from the Nationals Radio Network, and we're going to be getting into all things Washington Nationals, including MacKenzie Gore having a bounce-back start in yesterday's performance, but also Pete got a nice little look at Kaden Wallace, your newest Washington Nationals prospect, and you're going to want to hear about this.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11, and as well as our show page at LO_Nationals. And while you're at it, make sure to search up Locked On Nationals wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and including over on YouTube as well. Hit that subscriber button, drop a comment, drop a thumbs up, and while you're at it, just subscribe. How about that? So later on in today's show, we'll be discussing the Pirates and the Nationals series, as we are not getting a Paul Skenes and Dylan Cruz little matchup there. So that kind of stinks, but we'll discuss that later on in today's show. Also, we're going to get into a little bit of the starting staff and the rotation moving forward. What could it look like down the line? Should they add? Should they stay put? We'll discuss that a little bit later on, and as well as Jose Tena potentially being an everyday player. Well, before we get into any of it, we got to welcome in a special guest for today's show, Pete Medhurst from the Washington Nationals Radio Network. You can hear him calling the games. You can hear him doing post-game shows. And of course, he is known as Pete on Sports. So Pete, how are we doing today, my friend?
Doing good, Ryan. Pleased to be with you.
Of course. And, we actually had a little rundown here, but yesterday you were in attendance for the AA Harrisburg Senators as well as the Bowie Bay Sox game. So I do want to talk about that real quick, because I was checking the box score of today's game, and you and I just talked about this off the air real quick, but Cayden Wallace, the third baseman that the Nationals got in return for the Hunter Harvey trade, he had a very big night. And Pete, tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, when the Nats got him in return for Hunter Harvey coming back from Kansas City, and granted, the extra year of control does mean you're going to get a better package in return than you think. Because if Hunter Harvey, is able to stay healthy and has his A stuff, he's still a good late inning reliever. But when you turn a draft pick into what they did with Lamavita, and now you see what Kaden Wallace is capable of, I thought the ball that he hit that impressed me the most, probably 70 miles an hour last night, if that. But he's in against Jacob Webb, who was on a rehab assignment from the Orioles. So you're doing it against a big league arm, runners on base, and it's situational hitting. We talk about situational hitting all the time. How many times do you see two runners on, less than 2 outs or no outs, and the hitter can't execute? They don't move the runners up. So situational hitting. Obviously, he's a right-handed batter. Second baseman's playing close to second base. And he's got a gigantic gap on the right side to hit the ball through. And he does just that. And he ends up getting an RBI on a soft ball, but it's situational awareness. It's like, okay, I've got a gigantic hole over here. You know what? I'm going to push the ball through here on the right side. It was one of 2 hits for him last night. And he made a dazzling play at third base as well. He's got a cannon for an arm. But what was impressive about Harrisburg, and look, I mean, obviously Wood and all those guys progressed through the system up to Rochester. Robert Hassel just got promoted up to Rochester as well. So you're seeing these guys that we saw at Fredericksburg, the Susanas, the Lauras of the world from a pitching standpoint. And, now you're seeing Dalen Lyle, you're seeing Yoandy Morales, obviously coming back from an injury and performing well. You're seeing a Kaden Wallace in the lineup. Jeremy De La Rosa is also there right now at Harrisburg. So the top 4 or 5 guys in that Harrisburg lineup last night, I thought were really effective, fun to watch. And even Cody Wilson, young center fielder, he made a ridiculous grab in center field. He probably I don't want to say he was Jacob Young, but it was a Jacob Young-like grab defensively in center field where he basically ran from left center, made the catch up against the wall in right center field. So the system, which at one point several years ago, because of all the trades that, Mike and the organization had made to, replenish the major league roster, trying to contend. And obviously you make deals at the deadline and you lose a lot of prospects that way. That system has clearly been replenished now, because when we see guys get promoted, when we see, Cruz and Wood and all those guys go to AAA and then eventually the big leagues, now you're seeing a steady progression of guys to replace them. And Mike and his staff have worked incredibly hard to rebuild this farm system. And I think the farm system now is in a pretty solid place for this team going forward. And look, that's ultimately that tells you about your organization. You're seeing the fruits of your labor of your young players now at the big league roster. And now you look below it and there is ample talent coming behind them that if for some reason you have an injury, you have to replenish a guy. Eventually it looks like you're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, you know what? Like you're really hitting on a lot of points there, Pete. And I think the main takeaway at this point is that this farm system has depth now. And this is not something that we have seen really since the mid 2010s, even. Like we just have not had the depth in our farm system. But since you make that Juan Soto trade, you get CJ Abrams, MacKenzie Gore, you get James Wood, Harlan Susana. I mean, you get all the big name guys, Robert Hassel III. I mean, all of these guys that go into this farm system. And now you have even a deeper level of guys, whether it's Seaver King, who's down in low A right now. You've got Cayden Wallace, who seems pretty impressive. Yohandy Morales, Dalen Lyle. I mean, this farm system actually has some depth to it. And we have not seen this kind of depth in quite a few years here in DC. And of course, you sold your prospects to win a World Series in 2019, which is the right thing to do at that moment in time. But you also have to replenish that. If you look at the teams like the Dodgers, like people talk about this, the Dodgers spend all the money in the world. They absolutely do. But also in that case, they still have a deep farm system in order to kind of surround those big star pieces with Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani. They can surround those guys with younger prospects, and they have done that exceptionally well. You look at the Baltimore Orioles, Pete, who you've seen a lot of over the years. They now have a window of success probably for the next decade because of what they've done with their farm system. And they also got some money to spend here as well. So I've always thought this, that when it comes to baseball, I've always kind of talked about the farm system saying you have to have the farm right. You have to have your prospects in order to kind of open up that window. Because again, look back to the 2019 World Series team. You did spend on Max Scherzer, but Steven Strasburg lucked in to get in the first overall pick there, being one of the worst teams in baseball in 08. But you get Steven Strasburg, a homegrown talent. You get your Juan Soto, a homegrown talent. Anthony Rendon, Trey Turner, you traded from the San Diego Padres. I mean, these are all guys who come through the farm system, and it's not just about spending money. You have to get that depth in your farm system, and it's nice to see that the Nationals actually have that now here. So I think that was really cool in order to see Cayden Wallace in person last night. But also one guy who really intrigues me as well is Yohandy Morales. I mean, he was injured earlier on this season, missed a handful of months there, but now he's back in AA, and it seems to be looking pretty good for him. So what did you see from Morales yesterday as well? Is there any kind of lack of motion or any struggles out there? What did you kind of take away from Yo-Yo's performance?
I mean, I think they're hoping that he becomes a power bat for them eventually. I mean, that's the one thing the system has been devoid of, quite frankly, is power. And you're hoping that he can become that guy. He's probably at AAA now if he didn't have the missed time due to injury or close to it. You're just hoping that eventually that power can become consistent with pretty solid average. I mean, look, this guy's a good player, before he got drafted here by the Nationals on the college level. And I think that's the other thing. I mean, and obviously, me and you share a friendship with Grant Paulson, who does a lot of, work on this stuff too. And we constantly talk now about how the college player is so much more welcome and thought of as a prospect. The college player used to be a guy that was last resort. Everybody wanted to pick the high school guy because you got him at 17 or 18 and you could really start to mold him. And, he would be totally yours 3 or 4 years, 5 years, in some cases, try to develop a guy to get to the big leagues. But the college game has changed so dramatically now that we trust that college player. The college player takes less time, except in the case of maybe a Jackson Merrill or an international free agent like Juan Soto, the rare guy that doesn't take any time. But, it's cool to see the college player get that respect now, and the players that do well at that level can be here relatively quickly. I don't know if Morales challenges for any kind of a roster spot in 25 spring training. I think that'd probably be a little ambitious. But certainly by 26, I think you're hoping that Yohandy Morales is challenging for a spot as a first baseman or DH on the big league club here for the Nationals.
And those are all great points because, as you said, the big power bat, coming out of Miami, that's what he was touted as. And I love Yohandy Morales. I still really like the bat there. And I love the fact that they're putting him over at first base. So defensively, we'll just have to see as he continues to progress and as he continues to work on his defense there over at first, because we do know it's relatively new for him. But I have a feeling he'll probably be able to fit that first base position pretty well. But still, the Nationals, if they're going to want to compete, they're going to have to add a first baseman here. And of course, they also want to compete, Pete. Then they got to some way, somehow get some starters in this building. But even then, Pete, I do want to get into the starting pitching here because, as we know, MacKenzie Gore last night looked really sharp again. He kind of went through that little summer slump, but seems to be that he is breaking out of that. So let's get into that a little bit more here. But before we get into it, I'm going to tell you guys about some of our very good friends over at PrizePicks. And of course, when we talk about PrizePicks here, guys, you guys already know the drill. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And PrizePicks is the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks does not hit. And of course, PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and my home state, Virginia. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. So PrizePicks, run your game. Now we get back into it with Pete Medhurst from the Washington Nationals Radio Network. And Pete, we did want to talk about the starting pitching here, but of course, we talked about a lot of the minors of last night because Cayden Wallace, Yohandy Morales, but of course, let's get into some big league actions. MacKenzie Gore had a real nice kind of bounce back here, and he's really kind of putting together a nice stretch here. As last night, 6 innings pitched, 1 hit, 1 earned run, 9 strikeouts, and only 1 walk. And Pete, something that I've seen, and I think Davey Martinez talked about this as well, is what struggles with MacKenzie Gore is when he cannot have his fastball, when he cannot command his fastball. That's when really things go south. And yesterday you saw that in Miami, as earlier on this season, he had one of his better starts against the Marlins. So it's just nice to see MacKenzie Gore bounce back because I don't know about you, Pete. Like, I still believe in the fact that MacKenzie Gore could still be your 2 starter on your postseason team, and kind of think of it as like that Steven Strasburg of your 2019 rotation, if you know what I'm saying.
Look, the talent of the young man from Eastern North Carolina has never been an issue. The repertoire is there. I think, and Davey alluded to this last night a little bit too, and I think it's spot on. When MacKenzie was going well early in the season, his changeup was complementing that fastball command. And then the changeup kind of went away because when you start to fall behind and you start to press a little bit, a young pitcher wants to throw the ball even harder or bury that back foot slider even harder. You grip the ball a little harder. And I think he kind of fell susceptible to that. He became more of a thrower than a pitcher. Now you're starting to see him And what I love about MacKenzie is even when he was struggling, you always saw him step up, calm and cool, conversational after games, didn't give you the short, immature bursts or anything like that. He knew what was happening, working quite hard at it to try and fix it. But I think, again, the ability of any pitcher to change speeds at all and have success is the key in any form of pitching. And I think that was the big thing that you saw last night. The changeup was filthy. And, obviously, a little tough luck there in that sixth inning where he carries the perfect game into that sixth frame. But that's the pitcher that, as you say, the Nats are hoping, is their 1-2 in the rotation going forward. That was number one starter-like stuff last night from MacKenzie Gore. We know the repertoire has always been in there. It's just a matter of him mentally not being so hard on himself, so physically he doesn't make it harder on himself out on the mound. And again, talent's never been the issue. Last night is what obviously this club was hoping that he brings to the table.
And I think you brought up a great point there, Pete, because baseball, obviously it's a physical sport as well, but like the mental side of things, it's a real thing, and really in any sport out there, as you know. But I think MacKenzie Gore kind of has struggled with that a little bit. I mean, earlier on this season, I've always kind of noticed, like, if something goes wrong in the outfield, he'll kind of get down on himself a little bit during the game. And of course, he's a competitor. That's what you want to see, but that's usually when things go south for him. So you're starting to see him kind of level out a little bit. He's 25 years old. He's still young. I mean, he's still a puppy in the game of baseball at this point. So MacKenzie Gore, really at this point in time, I just need to see consistency from him. And earlier on in the season, the first half, I mean, MacKenzie Gore was putting up all-star numbers. I mean, we saw what we wanted to see from him. And then he went through that rough patch from July really all the way through midway through August. And over his last few starts here, he's been really good. So I really love to kind of see that little renaissance from him in 2024, because this is someone who's going to be a big part of this future. But speaking of the future, Pete, what do you kind of foresee with this starting rotation? Because recently they've been very good, including Patrick Corbin, who has gone out there every 5 days. He's been shoving the ball. I mean, Mitchell Parker at times has looked really good. And my personal favorite, DJ Hers. I mean, these are all guys who I think are big parts of the future, and as well as Jake Irvin. I mean, what do you kind of see for this rotation in this offseason? Do you kind of go into it thinking we have to add another arm in order to compete in 2025?
First of all, I need to see a birth certificate on DJ Hers. My guy looks about 12 out there. Look, I mean, if these pitchers are who they've been, and look, shout out to the veteran Patrick Corbin. I know it's been rough. There's no question. I mean, 31-67 since 2019. That's undeniable. This is a results-oriented business. I get it. But when you listen, Kyle Finnegan was very perceptive talking about him last week, and talked about all the work that he puts in. He beats the Yankees the way he did. It's 3 straight wins for him. That's a sign. I mean, look, Patrick Corbin could have shut this down. Patrick Corbin could have mailed this in. But even as a veteran player, continues to work hard at it, has pride in the performance, wants to figure out, why am I not getting the results that I've been getting? I think what he's doing is he's certainly pitching his way into a non-roster invitee role for another team, probably at the end of this year when the contract is up, which opens up a spot in the rotation. Now, do you go out and try to fill that in free agency? If the right guy is out there at the right price, yeah, I mean, probably doesn't hurt to get a little veteran influence, somebody that's been through this before, because otherwise you still got, as you mentioned, a lot of young puppies in this rotation. But I think they've all given you enough where you're kind of excited to see what it'll be like. Can they come back to spring training 2025 and replicate what they've been doing? Do they make even more progress? Do they take their offseason seriously, physically, conditioning wise, and come back in the same shape, ready to do this in 2025? Because there's nothing better, Ryan, on your salary roster than a young, cheap rotation. I mean, this is a very inexpensive rotation right now for the Washington Nationals. Obviously, what kind of budget Mike has to attack the offseason with, will play a lot into this. What he does, maybe trying to enhance the lineup, the bench as well, may have something to do with this. Does a Brad Lord come up and challenge for a spot in the rotation? He's had a very good run through the minor leagues. He's now pitching at AAA right now for Rochester. There are so many more elements to this conversation that think about spring training this year. We had no idea what this rotation was going to look like.
No.
And if you could have told me at one point that these 5 guys would be the rotation, we could have crushed it at FanDuel, at about, plus 10,000. Because I don't believe anybody saw anything like this. We were maybe hoping for hers in 2025 because his arm, he's really made some nice adjustments since coming over to the Nationals. He's cut down on the walk rate that seemingly plagued him a little bit, talking to a couple of the scouts out at games. The walk rate was really what plagued him when he was in the Cubs system. The fastball's always been live. We knew that. The ability to strike batters out, it's always been there. We knew that. But Irvin, Parker, obviously DJ, and obviously MacKenzie Gore, we've seen enough from these guys that get you excited because it's an inexpensive rotation going forward, which allows you to spend if you have to. Look, they're going to have to spend on the bullpen as well for next year to get Kyle Finnegan some more reinforcements there to help out in the back end. I'd love to hang on to Robert Garcia. I love what Robert Garcia has done in his role in that bullpen as well. And anytime you have a left-hander that can, go out and do the things that he's been able to do, certainly like to keep him as part of the bullpen for next year. But I believe that's where Mike and his, staff are going to be shopping coming up in the offseason. And when you have an inexpensive rotation, it allows you to really explore all options, price being no really, deterrent to try and improve your ball club in the 2025 season.
Those are all great points, Pete. And of course, with the Nationals, I do believe, my personal opinion, you do actually have a deep system as far as arms go. They may not be the front of it, but also we can't even forget about Josiah Gray, who's going to be recovering from TJ. Yeah. Might see him in the second half of next year. We'll see how that goes. Cade Cavalli as well, who's recovering for it right now. The Nationals, and of course, Brad Lord. The Nationals do have some arms, and of course, Harleen Susanna, Travis Sikora, who we haven't even talked about today. The Nationals, they do have some depth there, so it'll be interesting to see how they attack this offseason. But Pete, you're a big sports fan like I am, big college sports fan. You call the Navy games, and you watch college ball. You don't get to see Paul Skenes and Dylan Cruz for this Pirates series. So let's kind of get into that real quick. But before we do it, let me tell you guys about our friends over at Ibotta. And of course, are you taking that dream vacation this summer but dreading the cost? With Ibotta, you get cash back on all your purchases so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. And don't get it twisted, summer is still here. You feel the temperature outside, high 70s. It is beautiful here in DC. So if you might be wondering what Ibotta is, well, Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That can cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight that you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner that you have been craving. So it's time you join the over 50 million users to use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Let's get back into it with Pete Medhurst from the Washington Nationals Radio Network. And Pete, this is something that I've been eyeing for quite some time. Like everyone's talking about, Dylan Cruz is up in the majors. Paul Skenes is doing his thing, one of the better pitchers in the National League. We're going to get that lineup. We're going to see it. Paul Skenes versus Dylan Cruz. Not a thing. You're not getting it. I mean, just how disappointed are you, Pete? Because I'm wildly disappointed.
Look, I think that's what we love sports. We love, we love storylines. And this would have been a great storyline. Two great teammates, obviously, responsible for helping LSU win a national championship. And, it would have been a lot of fun to see. Skenes knows Dylan Crews really well. Crews knows Paul Skenes really well. Both guys supremely confident, and it would have been an awesome thing to watch. I'm sure at some point we will get it somewhere down the line. But think about it. I mean, who could have imagined? And I think any of us that watch college baseball, we knew Paul was good. To be able to come into Major League Baseball, though, and do it is always a different animal. But when you pitch in the SEC, when you're the Friday night guy in the SEC, you're doing it against the best competition college baseball has to offer. So you knew he was going to be good. We didn't know he would be this good this fast at the big league level. And in some ways, Dylan Crews is also showing us, I don't want to say an easy adaptation to big league baseball because it's never easy, but there's a comfort level with Dylan Crews. It looks like at the big league level. Obviously, we've seen him run down balls in the outfield. As an outfielder, we know he's, plus in that category. But he just seems to have good approach up there, doesn't overswing. We've already seen him hit a couple of nasty home runs at Nationals Park off the back wall of the bullpen in left center field. Look, you have to temper your enthusiasm a little bit. But man, it's exciting to see prospects that are supposed to be good. Just like the net. Look, you can draft 1-1 overall, but there's no guarantee Steven Strasburg is going to be Steven Strasburg. He could have been Brian Taylor. There's no guarantee Bryce Harper was going to be Bryce Harper. I mean, he's still got to go out and do it. But when you draft up there and your guy looks the part, that's the exciting thing. Is Dylan Crews, when you see him play, you kind of go, ooh, he's different. Just like when you watch James Wood, you're like, ooh, he's different out there. So exciting times going forward. And yes, I'm sure at some point we'll be getting that matchup. And I'm sure Livy Dunn will be doing the play-by-play on Twitter of that matchup as it's going on out there. Great to be Paul Skenes and have a girlfriend who's a great athlete who's incredibly supportive the way she is in all facets.
I know. And you know what? Like, Pete, because here on Locked On Nationals, I do like to kind of dip into some other baseball features. And I will admit, I'm a young guy. I'm 24 years old, but that was the first time we have mentioned Livy Dunn on this show. So hey, I don't think people were going to be expecting that.
Think about this, Ryan. She made more money at LSU than the two of them did.
Oh, I know. She's a superstar.
Yes.
She is
made more
superstar.
money than they did.
So that has been one power couple, but I mean, just getting back to baseball here, Pete. I can't get back. We're gonna get back to baseball. I can talk Livy Dunn too. Don't worry. But I mean, I'm so disappointed though. Like, I can't just keep on saying this. I'm like, God, like, I've been looking at this. I'm like, Dylan Crews, like, months ago, I'm like, Dylan Crews should be up right around there. Like, they're going to make it happen.
And you know what was going to happen? I predict what was going to happen. Skenes was either going to overthrow and walk him, or Crews was going to hit a 420-foot missile.
Oh, and that's what he did. That's what they did when Crews was over at the Air Force Academy and Crews was a freshman at LSU. He took him deep. So I was like, that's going to be an awesome kind of game to watch. But of course, you miss him by just one game because the Pirates are going to a 6-man rotation to obviously stretch out a lot of their younger arms. But so we're not getting that matchup. I mean, that's what everyone in baseball wanted to see, because I can tell you this, and I know for 100% fact, if Paul Skenes was going up against the Nationals, Dylan Crews would have been the leadoff hitter. That would have been the first batter of the game. I mean, it would have been on MLB Network. People would be tuned in, and that just would have been really cool to see our own on a national perspective there. So you don't get to see it, but whatever. There's always 2025, Pete. But Pete, always appreciate the time. Definitely will be having you on soon as the offseason comes. And the Nats are going to have a big one coming up here soon. So you can catch Pete Medhurst on Twitter at Pete Medhurst. And Pete, thank you so much for the time today.
Anytime, Ryan. Thank you.
No problem. And of course, I'm Ryan Clary. He's Pete Medhurst. You can catch us both on Twitter. And of course, while you're at it, subscribe over on YouTube. Just search Locked On Nationals. That is where you'll find our daily podcast for your Washington Nationals. Have a good one. Go Nats.